The Whitmore Library fell silent at 10:30 when the last scholars gathered their notes and shuffled toward the grand oak doors, leaving behind only the smell of dust and dying candles. Bryony Kellaway preferred these hours, the quiet ones, the invisible ones. She moved between the towering shelves like a ghost, her worn leather shoes making no sound against the marble floors. In her arms, she carried manuscripts that needed cataloging, their spines cracked and fragile with age. The head librarian, Mr. Pemberton, had left hours ago with strict instructions about which volumes required attention before morning. He never stayed late himself, of course. That privilege belonged to Bryony, the assistant who could be trusted with keys, but not with a proper salary. At 24, she had perfected the art of being overlooked. Not that she was plain. Her chestnut hair caught copper in the candlelight, and her eyes held the deep green of forest shadows. But beauty required maintenance, required gowns that had not been mended 6 times over, required jewelry that was not paste and brass. Beauty required money, and money was something the Kellaway family had long since exhausted. She settled at her small desk in the corner of the archive room, a space so cramped that most scholars never noticed it existed. From here, she could work undisturbed, surrounded by centuries of accumulated knowledge that belonged to everyone except her. The candle beside her flickered. She cupped her hand around the flame instinctively. Candles cost money. Everything cost money. Her mother's medicine cost 12 shillings a week. Her brother Tobias's school fees were 3 months overdue. The landlord had given them until the end of the month before eviction proceedings would begin. Bryony pushed these thoughts aside and focused on the manuscript before her. A 15th century treatise on astronomy. The Latin dense but beautiful. She traced the illuminated letters with careful fingers, marveling at the craftsmanship of long-dead monks who had poured their devotion into gold leaf and azure ink. This was her sanctuary. Between these pages, she could forget that her world was crumbling. She could lose herself in stars mapped by men who had been dust for 500 years. The clock in the main hall struck 11. She should leave soon. The streets were not safe for a woman alone at this hour. But the silence here was so peaceful, so completely unlike the coughing fits that kept her mother awake through the night, that Bryony lingered. Just a few more pages. She was so absorbed in the manuscript that she did not hear the footsteps, did not notice the shadow that fell across her desk, blocking the candlelight, did not sense him at all until a voice spoke directly behind her. "You're Miss Kellaway, aren't you?" Bryony's heart slammed against her ribs. She spun around, nearly knocking over the precious candle, and found herself staring at a man's chest. A very well-dressed chest. Charcoal wool, impeccably tailored, with a waistcoat of deep burgundy silk beneath. Her gaze traveled upward, past a cravat tied in an elaborate knot, past a jaw that could have been carved from marble, until she met a pair of eyes the color of winter storms. Gray. Cold. And watching her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. "The library is closed," she managed, her voice steadier than her pulse. "You should not be here." "Neither should you, technically." His voice was low and smooth, the kind of voice that expected obedience. "Yet here we both are." He stepped closer, and Bryony caught the scent of him. Sandalwood, and something darker. Expensive. Everything about him screamed wealth and power, from the signet ring on his finger to the way he occupied space, as though the world owed him room. "How did you get in?" "Doors open for me, Miss Kellaway. They tend to." A ghost of a smile crossed his lips. "I'm Caius Vance." The name struck her like a physical blow. Caius Vance, the Duke of Thornwood, one of the wealthiest men in England, owner of estates that sprawled across 3 counties, rumored to be as ruthless in business as he was reclusive in society. "Your Grace." She rose hastily, remembering propriety even as confusion clouded her mind. If you need assistance with the collection, I can arrange an appointment with Mr. Pemberton in the morning. I don't want Pemberton. I want you. The words hung between them, strange and weighted with meaning she could not decipher. Me? I'm just an assistant. I catalog manuscripts and repair damaged bindings. I'm nobody. On the contrary, he pulled a chair from a nearby desk and sat, crossing his long legs as though settling in for an extended conversation. You're exactly who I've been looking for. I've been watching you for 3 weeks. The revelation sent ice down her spine. She thought of all the late nights, all the hours alone in this archive. That's deeply unsettling, Your Grace. I imagine it is. But I needed to be certain. I needed someone intelligent, discreet, and desperate enough to consider an unconventional arrangement. I'm not desperate. His eyebrow rose. Your mother is dying, Miss Kellaway. Consumption. The medicine that might slow her decline costs more than you earn in a month. Your brother was sent home from school last week because the fees haven't been paid. And your landlord has already filed paperwork to remove you from your lodgings. Each fact landed like a blow. How did he know? You had me investigated. Thoroughly. No apology, no shame. I told you. I needed to be certain. Certain of what? Caius Vance leaned forward, and in the candlelight, his gray eyes seemed almost silver. When he spoke, his voice dropped to barely above a whisper. Marry me, Miss Kellaway. For 1 year. She actually laughed, a sharp, incredulous sound. You're mad. Frequently accused, rarely proven. That ghost of a smile again. But I assure you, I'm entirely serious. Dukes don't marry library assistants. This one does. Or rather, this one will appear to. He reached into his coat and withdrew a folded document. Before you refuse entirely, perhaps you should know what I'm offering. He slid the paper across the desk toward her. Bryony stared at the document as though it might burst into flames. Slowly, against every instinct screaming at her to run, she picked it up and unfolded it. The number at the bottom stopped her breath. £10,000. Enough to pay for her mother's treatment at the finest sanatorium in Switzerland. Enough to clear every debt her father had left behind when he died. Enough to secure Tobias's education through university. Enough to ensure the Kellaway family never faced eviction or hunger again. More money than she would earn in 3 lifetimes. That sum will be deposited in an account under your name the morning after our wedding, Caius said, watching her face with unnerving attention. An additional 5,000 upon the successful completion of our arrangement. £15,000 total, Miss Kellaway, for 1 year of your time. Her mouth had gone completely dry. Why? Because I need a wife, temporarily. That doesn't answer my question. My grandfather's will contained certain provisions to claim my full inheritance and maintain control of the Thornwood estates. I must be married before my 32nd birthday. That deadline arrives in 6 weeks. Then marry someone appropriate, a lady of standing, someone from your own world. Ladies of standing come with families who expect the marriage to be permanent, families who would contest an annulment. I need someone with no connections, no social power, and no desire to remain Duchess of Thornwood beyond the contracted period. Someone desperate, Bryony translated silently. Someone who could not afford to say no. And after the year ends? Quiet annulment. We'll cite irreconcilable differences. I'll ensure you're settled somewhere comfortable, far from London gossip. You'll keep the money, keep your reputation intact, and we'll never see each other again. It was clinical, calculated, a business transaction dressed in wedding clothes. And yet, her mother's coughing echoed in her memory, the doctor's grave expression when he explained that the damp London air was killing her slowly. The letter from Tobias, trying so hard to sound brave about leaving school. How do I know you'll honor this agreement? Because it will be a legal contract. My solicitor will ensure your interests are protected. He rose from the chair, straightening his coat with maddening calm. You have until tomorrow night to decide. Same time, same place. I'll be waiting. Then he was gone, his footsteps fading into silence, leaving Bryony alone with a guttering candle and a piece of paper that could save everyone she loved. Bryony spent the following day in a fog, moving through her duties mechanically, while her mind circled endlessly around the Duke's impossible proposition. That evening, she visited her mother. Cordelia Kellaway lay propped against thin pillows in their cramped lodgings, her once beautiful face gaunt and pale. Each breath rattled in her chest like stones in a tin cup. But her eyes, the same forest green as Bryony's, still held fierce intelligence. "You're troubled," her mother said. "Don't try to hide it. I've known your face since before you could speak." So Bryony told her. Not everything, not the Duke's name or the exact terms, but enough. A marriage of convenience, a year of pretending, money that could change everything. When she finished, her mother was quiet for a long moment. "Do you trust this man?" "I don't know him." "That's not what I asked." Bryony thought of Caius Vance's gray eyes, cold and calculating, but also the precision of his offer, the legal protections he had mentioned, the clinical honesty with which he had laid out his motivations. "I think he needs this arrangement as much as I do, perhaps more." Her mother squeezed her hand with surprising strength. "Then you have leverage, my darling. Use it." At 10:30 that night, Bryony returned to the archive room. The candle she had left burning had melted to a stub, and shadows pooled in every corner. She almost convinced herself he would not come. Then the darkness shifted, and Caius Vance emerged from between the shelves like a specter, materializing from ink. "You came," he said. "I have conditions." If her directness surprised him, he did not show it. He simply inclined his head. "I'm listening." Bryony drew herself up to her full height and met his gaze without flinching. "First, the initial payment is deposited before the wedding, not after. I need to arrange my mother's transport to the sanatorium immediately. Her condition will not wait for ceremonies." "Agreed." "Second, my brother Tobias is to be reinstated at his school, with all fees paid through completion of his education. That payment also happens before the wedding." "Also agreed." "Third, I want a copy of the contract reviewed by a solicitor of my choosing before I sign anything." "Sensible. I'll have my man deliver the documents tomorrow. Choose whatever legal counsel you trust." "I don't know any solicitors." "Then I'll provide a list of reputable ones with no connection to me. Select from that." He was agreeing to everything. There had to be a trap somewhere. "Why are you being so accommodating?" "Because your conditions are reasonable. I have no interest in trapping you in an arrangement you resent. Resentful partners make poor performers, and I need our marriage to be convincing." "To whom?" "Society. My family's solicitors. And most importantly, my grandmother." The way he said grandmother carried weight, warning. Octavia Vance has spent a lifetime perfecting the art of detecting deception. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. If she suspects this marriage is fraudulent, she has the power to contest my claim to the estates. Everything I've built would crumble. He extended his hand. "Do we have an agreement, Miss Kellaway?" She looked at his hand. Long fingers. No calluses. A hand that had never known labor or want. She placed her palm against his. "We have an agreement, Your Grace." His grip was warm and firm, and a strange current passed between them at the contact. Bryony pulled away quickly, her pulse unsteady. One final thing. His voice had dropped lower. You'll need to move into Thornwood House immediately. Tomorrow. Tomorrow? That's impossible. I have responsibilities. My position at the library, consider it resigned. I've already spoken with Pemberton. You what? Anger flared through her confusion. You had no right to make that decision without consulting me. Your salary there was an insult. I've arranged a settlement that will more than compensate. He straightened his cuffs with maddening calm. A carriage will collect you and your belongings at noon. Your mother will be transported separately to the sanatorium, with a private nurse attending her. Your brother will receive notice of his reinstatement by morning post. It was all happening too fast. The ground was shifting beneath her feet. You had this planned before I even agreed. I had it prepared. There's a difference. He turned to leave. And you'll need to start calling me Caius. Wives don't address their husbands by title. Then he was gone, leaving Bryony alone with the terrifying realization that she had just sold a year of her life to a man who planned 10 moves ahead. And she did not even know what game they were playing. Chapter 5. The Gilded Cage. Thornwood House rose from the London streets like a monument to obscene wealth. 4 stories of pale Portland stone, with columns flanking the entrance, and windows that caught afternoon light like dozens of watching eyes. Bryony stood on the pavement, her single traveling case at her feet, and felt profoundly, terrifyingly small. The butler, Sedgwick, a man with silver hair and an expression of absolute neutrality, led her through an entrance hall that could have swallowed her family's entire lodgings 3 times over. Marble floors, a sweeping staircase, paintings of stern-faced ancestors watching from gilded frames. Her rooms in the East Wing were beautiful and completely impersonal. A sitting room decorated in shades of blue and cream. A bedroom with a 4-poster bed draped in silk. A private bathing chamber with actual running water. Everything elegant, tasteful, and devoid of warmth. A gilded cage, Bryony thought. That's exactly what this is. She was examining the view from her window when Caius himself appeared at her door. You're settling in. I'm standing in a room. That's not quite the same thing. His lips twitched. Tonight, we dine with my grandmother. Bryony's stomach dropped. Already? Octavia requested your presence the moment she learned of our engagement. Delaying would only increase her suspicion. He moved closer. She'll test you, Bryony, push you. Try to find cracks in our story. You need to be prepared. It was the first time he had used her given name. It sounded strange in his voice, intimate somehow. What story, exactly? You've told me almost nothing about yourself. How am I supposed to convince anyone we're genuinely attached? Green, he said without hesitation. My favorite color is dark green, like old forests. I take my coffee black, my whiskey neat. I read philosophy when I cannot sleep, which is often. I fence every morning at 6 because the discipline clears my mind. Why can't you sleep? Something shuddered behind his eyes. That's not part of our arrangement. What should I know about your grandmother? She's brilliant, ruthless, and she loved my mother more than anything in the world. My mother died 3 years ago. Grandmother has never quite forgiven me for surviving when she didn't. Before Bryony could respond, he strode toward the door. Dinner is at 8. Wear something from the modiste. And Bryony, don't let her see you're afraid. She'll use it. After he left, her gaze fell on the bedside table. A book lay there, leather-bound and worn. She picked it up, curious. A collection of poetry. Keats. And on the inside cover, an inscription in faded ink. For my darling Rosalind. May you find beauty even in darkness. Your loving godmother, Rosalind. A woman's name. This had been someone else's room. Someone Caius had cared about enough to preserve her belongings. What had happened to Rosalind? And why had Caius put Bryony in her room? The dining room at Thornwood House could have hosted a parliamentary session. A table long enough to seat 30 dominated the space, though tonight only 3 places were set at one end. Octavia Vance sat in her chair like a queen upon a throne, 80 years old if she was a day, but with eyes sharp as cut diamonds and a spine that had never known a moment's slump. Her silver hair was arranged in an elaborate style, and diamonds glittered at her throat, ears, and wrists with almost aggressive opulence. She did not rise when they entered. She merely surveyed Bryony with the kind of assessment that stripped away pretense and examined the bones beneath. So, this is the girl. Grandmother, may I present Miss Bryony Kellaway. Bryony, my grandmother. Octavia Vance, Dowager Duchess of Thornwood. Sit. Let me look at you properly. The first course arrived, chilled soup that Bryony could not identify. She waited for Octavia to lift her spoon before touching her own, a small test she was determined to pass. Kellaway, Octavia mused, tasting the name. I knew a Bartholomew Kellaway. Charming man. Terrible judgment. Lost everything in a railway speculation. Any relation? My father, Your Grace. Ah, so you're the impoverished daughter, come to restore family fortunes through an advantageous match. Grandmother, Caius's voice held warning. I'm simply stating facts. If the girl cannot handle facts, she certainly cannot handle being a duchess. Those diamond-sharp eyes fixed on Bryony. Well, am I wrong? Bryony set down her spoon with careful precision. No, Your Grace, you're entirely correct. My family is ruined. My mother is dying. When your grandson proposed, I was shelving books in a library basement, earning less in a month than this silverware cost to polish. Octavia's eyebrow rose. Whatever she had expected, honesty apparently was not it. I have no title, Bryony continued. No connections, no dowry. Nothing to recommend me except whatever qualities convinced your grandson I was worth the risk of his reputation. If that makes me a fortune hunter, so be it. I'd rather be a living fortune hunter than watch my family die of pride. Silence fell over the table. Then, slowly, Octavia smiled. It was not a warm expression. Spine. You have spine. That's something at least. The verbal sparring continued through 4 courses. By dessert, Bryony was exhausted. But something had shifted in the old woman's demeanor. Not warmth exactly, but perhaps grudging acknowledgement. You'll need considerable work, Octavia announced, as coffee was served. The wedding is in 6 weeks. That's barely enough time to make you presentable. She swept toward the door, then paused. One more thing, Miss Kellaway. I knew Rosalind, too. She was my goddaughter, and she was worth 10 of any common fortune hunter. The name hit Bryony like a slap. She turned to Caius. His face had gone pale, his jaw tight. Who was Rosalind? Not tonight. Caius, if I'm going to convince anyone this marriage is real, I need to understand what I'm walking into. Who was she? He stood abruptly. Rosalind was my fiancée. She died 3 years ago, the same night as my mother, and my grandmother blames me because she's right to. He walked out, leaving Bryony alone at the endless table, surrounded by crystal and silver and the weight of secrets that could destroy everything. The weeks that followed blurred into an exhausting parade of fittings, lessons, and carefully orchestrated public appearances. Bryony learned to walk with a duchess's posture, to navigate the labyrinth of aristocratic etiquette, to smile until her face ached at people who looked through her, even as they fawned over her new status. But somewhere between the endless preparations, something unexpected began to happen. Caius started joining her for breakfast. At first, they ate in silence, two strangers sharing space. But gradually, the silence became comfortable. Then it became conversation. "You're frowning at the marmalade," he observed one morning. "Has it offended you?" "I was thinking about Spinoza, actually." His newspaper lowered. "At 7 in the morning? Is there a more appropriate hour for Dutch philosophy? I generally reserve existential contemplation for afternoon." But he was smiling, that rare, real smile that transformed his face from cold marble to something almost warm. What aspect troubles you? His determinism, the idea that free will is an illusion, that everything we do is simply the inevitable result of prior causes. I find it depressing. Or liberating. If our choices are predetermined, we bear no moral responsibility for their outcomes. That sounds like something a man would say to excuse his own decisions. His smile faded slightly. Perhaps. She had touched something raw. She could see it in the sudden tension of his shoulders. But before she could apologize, he changed the subject, asking about her mother's progress at the sanatorium. That was when Bryony realized he had been keeping track. He knew that her mother's coughing had improved, that she had gained weight, that she had written letters expressing cautious hope for the first time in years. "You didn't have to do that," she said quietly. "I protect my investments." But the words lacked their usual coldness, and when their eyes met across the breakfast table, something shifted in the space between them. The wedding preparations intensified. Through it all, Caius remained at her side. He laughed at her quiet observations about the pomposity of aristocratic gatherings. He brought her rare books from his personal collection, volumes of philosophy and astronomy that must have cost fortunes. One evening in the library, she finally asked him directly about the fire. "We were engaged for 2 years," he said quietly. "There was a fire at our country estate. My mother and Rosalind were trapped in the East Wing. I tried to reach them. I couldn't. Caius, I was the one who suggested they stay that weekend. I was the one who assured them the estate was safe, despite reports of faulty wiring." His voice had gone hollow. "My grandmother believes I killed them through negligence. She's not wrong." Bryony moved without thinking. She crossed to his chair and knelt beside it, taking his hand in both of hers. "A tragic accident is not murder. You didn't start that fire." "I might as well have." "No. Guilt is not the same as responsibility. You can mourn them, miss them, and wish things had been different. But carrying blame for circumstances beyond your control isn't honor. It's self-destruction." He looked down at her, and for the first time, she saw the full weight of grief behind those storm-gray eyes. 3 years of carrying this alone. "You sound very certain," he said quietly. "I am certain. About this, at least." His free hand rose to touch her face. His fingers traced her cheekbone with devastating gentleness. "Bryony." Her name was barely a whisper. She should pull away. This was not part of the arrangement. They had a contract, boundaries, and clearly defined terms. But she did not pull away, and neither did he. The wedding was 5 days away. Everything had changed since that night in the library. The careful distance between her and Caius had collapsed into something charged and terrifying. Every accidental touch sent sparks across her skin. Every shared glance lasted too long. The air between them had become weighted with words neither of them spoke. She was falling for him, against all reason, against their contract, against the explicit terms of their arrangement. And she was fairly certain he was falling for her, too. A knock interrupted her spiral. She opened the door to find Caius, dressed for dinner, but looking uncharacteristically uncertain. "Walk with me." The garden behind Thornwood House was beautiful in the evening light. Roses climbed ancient stone walls. A fountain murmured somewhere out of sight. They walked in silence until they reached a secluded bench beneath an oak tree, that must have been centuries old. "I need to tell you something," Caius said. "Before the wedding. Before you're legally bound to me." Bryony's heart clenched. "You're ending the arrangement." "What?" "No." He turned to face her fully. "I'm trying to be honest with you. Something I should have done from the beginning." He took a breath, and she watched him gather courage like armor. "The inheritance isn't the real reason I need this marriage, or not the only reason. My grandmother has been threatening to have me declared mentally unfit, to take control of the estates herself. That's absurd. You're one of the most capable people I've ever met. The courts don't know that. They'd see a grieving man, unmarried at 31, with whispers of instability following him." His expression darkened. "I needed a wife to prove stability, to counter her claims. I manipulated you into this arrangement without giving you the full truth. You deserve to know what you're actually walking into." She should be angry. She should feel betrayed. Instead, all she felt was an overwhelming tenderness for this broken man who carried so much weight alone. "Why tell me now? 5 days before the wedding. I've already signed the contract. Because I cannot marry you with this lie between us. Even a temporary marriage should be built on honesty." He looked away. "And because I've come to care about your opinion of me more than I expected. More than I should." The admission hung in the air like mist. "Caius," she reached for his hand. "Look at me." He turned, and she saw fear in his eyes. Fear that she would walk away. "I'm not leaving," she said firmly. "The arrangement stands. Your grandmother doesn't get to win. Bryony, I'm not finished." She squeezed his hand. "But I need you to know something too. Somewhere in the last few weeks, this stopped being just an arrangement for me. I don't know what to call it. I don't know if it's real or if we've just been pretending so well that we've confused ourselves. But when I imagine the year ending and walking away from you, I feel..." She broke off, unable to complete the sentence. "What do you feel?" His voice was rough. "Loss. I feel loss." He moved closer. His hand rose to cup her face. She could feel the warmth of him, smell sandalwood, and something deeper. Something that had become unbearably familiar. "This is dangerous," he murmured. "We agreed to boundaries." "I know. If we cross them, there's no going back." "I know that, too." His thumb traced her lower lip. Her breath caught. Every nerve in her body was singing toward him. "Tell me to stop," he whispered. She couldn't. She didn't want to. His lips were an inch from hers. She could feel the tension radiating through him, the barely leashed restraint. Then footsteps crunched on the garden path. They sprang apart as Sedgwick appeared around the hedge, his expression perfectly neutral despite the obvious interruption. "Forgive me, Your Grace. Miss Kellaway. The Dowager Duchess has arrived unexpectedly. She's requesting an audience with you both. Immediately." Caius's face went pale. "She's not supposed to return until the wedding." "Nevertheless, Your Grace. She's waiting in the drawing room." Sedgwick paused meaningfully. "She appears to have brought documentation." Whatever fragile thing had been building between them would have to wait. The dragon had returned to her lair. Octavia stood in the center of the drawing room, like a general surveying a battlefield. Gone was the cold formality of their previous encounter. In its place was something far more dangerous. Triumph. "Sit," she commanded when they entered. "Both of you." "Grandmother, whatever this is," I said sit. They sat. Octavia reached into the leather folio at her side and withdrew a sheaf of papers. She spread them across the table with deliberate precision. Bryony's stomach turned to ice. She recognized one of the documents, a copy of their contract, the private agreement that outlined the terms of their arrangement. "Did you think I wouldn't investigate, Caius? Did you imagine I would simply accept this sudden engagement without question? How did you get that?" Caius's voice was deadly calm. I have connections at your solicitor's office. Octavia's smile was sharp as broken glass. A marriage of convenience. 1 year, then annulment. Payment in exchange for performance. Did you really think you could deceive me? Grandmother, don't. She held up a hand. I've tolerated your grief. I've endured your guilt. But this, marrying some penniless fortune hunter to circumvent your grandfather's will. I am not unstable. Then why this desperate scheme? Octavia turned her gaze to Bryony. And you? What did he offer you? How much was your dignity worth? Bryony forced herself to meet the old woman's eyes. He offered salvation for my family. The same thing you would have done in my position. I would never have prostituted myself for money. Because you've never had to. Bryony's voice trembled, but did not break. You've never watched your mother cough blood into her handkerchief. You've never seen your brother try to hide tears over a letter, saying he couldn't return to school. So forgive me, Your Grace, if I don't accept your judgment on choices you've never had to make. Silence fell. Octavia's expression flickered. This marriage is a fraud, she continued. I have documentation proving it. The wedding will not take place, or I present this evidence to the courts. Caius loses the inheritance. You face possible criminal charges. And you, Miss Kellaway, will be exposed as a fortune hunter before all of London society. You would do that to your own grandson? I would do anything to protect the Vance legacy from someone unworthy of it. Her voice softened almost imperceptibly. He killed my goddaughter, Miss Kellaway. He killed his own mother. You're wrong, Bryony stood. You've spent so long blaming him that you've missed what's actually happening. He's been working to improve conditions for factory workers. He's been managing the estates with more care than any of his predecessors. He's been trying, every single day, to deserve the life they lost. You've developed feelings for him. How unfortunate. Octavia moved toward the door. The wedding is canceled. I suggest you return to your library, Miss Kellaway. This fairy tale is over. She swept out, taking the damning documents with her. Bryony turned to Caius. He stood motionless, his face ashen. I'll leave, she said quietly. I'll go back to my old life. You can tell society I ended the engagement. Stop! Caius, she has proof. If we proceed, she'll destroy us both. I don't care. He crossed to her, taking her hands in his. Somewhere in the last few weeks, you became more important than any inheritance, more important than proving myself, more important than anything. Tears burned in her eyes. She'll ruin us. Then we'll be ruined together. He pulled her closer. I love you, Bryony. Not as part of any arrangement. Not as performance for society. I love you, and I am terrified of losing you. You don't mean that. I have never meant anything more. Stay. Marry me. Not for a year. Forever. If we do this, there's no going back. I don't want to go back. He pressed his forehead to hers. Say yes, please. She closed her eyes and said yes. The wedding took place 5 days later, exactly as originally planned. Octavia did not attend, but she had underestimated one crucial factor. In the days before the ceremony, Sedgwick, loyal to Caius since childhood, had quietly reminded certain influential people of the Dowager Duchess's previous attempts to control the family fortune. Rumors began circulating, not about fraudulent engagement, but about a bitter grandmother determined to destroy her grandson's happiness. By the wedding morning, the narrative had shifted. Caius was a romantic figure, choosing love over family pressure. And Bryony was a brilliant scholar who had captured his heart against all odds. The ceremony was small, intimate, held in the private chapel at Thornwood House with only a handful of witnesses. Tobias, home from school, stood beaming beside Bryony's mother, who had traveled from the sanatorium for the occasion. She was still frail, but color had returned to her cheeks, and hope had returned to her eyes. When Bryony appeared in the chapel doorway, wearing a gown of ivory silk, Caius's expression transformed. Wonder. Pure, unguarded wonder. She walked toward him, her heart pounding with a different kind of fear than she had ever known. Not fear of poverty or loss. Fear of happiness. Fear that this fragile, impossible thing might shatter. But when she reached him, when his hand took hers, the fear dissolved. The vows were traditional. But when Caius said, "With all that I am, and all that I have, I honor you," Bryony heard something else beneath the formal phrases. An apology for how this began. A promise for what it would become. When the officiant pronounced them married, Caius kissed her. Not the careful public kiss they had practiced. Something real and hungry and full of everything they had been denying. Later, he presented her with a small velvet box. Not a ring. You already have that. Something else. She opened it and found a key, small, ornate, clearly antique. It opens a cabinet in the library, the rarest volumes in the collection, first editions, illuminated manuscripts. They're yours now, whenever you want them. It was such a perfect gift, so precisely attuned to who she was. "You're crying," he observed, happy tears. I didn't know those existed. Neither did I. Until you. What followed was tender and awkward and wonderful. Two people learning each other for the first time, finding rhythms and responses, laughing at fumbles, gasping at discoveries. "I love you," she said into the darkness. "I love you too. Improbably. Completely." The years that followed wove themselves into something neither of them had dared to imagine. 10 years after that candlelit proposal in a dusty library, Thornwood House had transformed. Where once there had been austere elegance, there was now comfortable chaos. Books lay open on tables everywhere. A child's wooden blocks had migrated into the philosophy section. A stuffed rabbit occupied the chair once reserved for visiting scholars. Bryony sat in her favorite window seat, afternoon light falling across the pages of a manuscript she was translating, a treatise on medieval astronomy, her third such publication. "Mama, watch!" 7-year-old Edmund came careening into the library, pursued by his father. The boy launched himself at Bryony's legs, using her skirts as a shield. "He's supposed to be napping," Caius said, though his stern expression was undermined by the laughter in his eyes. "Not tired," Edmund announced. He had his father's gray eyes and his mother's stubborn chin. Bryony lifted her son into her lap. "What if Papa reads you a story?" "The dragon story." Caius settled beside her for a moment, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Letter from Switzerland this morning. Your mother wants to visit for Edmund's birthday." 10 years ago, Cordelia Kellaway had been given months to live. Now she was making plans for international travel. And Tobias? Top of his class. Again. Cambridge is already discussing professorship opportunities. A knock interrupted them. Sedgwick appeared in the doorway. "You have a visitor, Your Grace." Before Bryony could ask who, a familiar figure stepped into view. Octavia Vance. She looked older, smaller somehow. The sharp edges had softened into something approaching frailty. Caius rose, positioning himself protectively. "I came to apologize," Octavia said quietly. "I came to admit I was wrong." Silence stretched through the library. "I spent years waiting for this marriage to collapse. Instead, I watched from a distance as you built something real." She drew a shaky breath. "That boy has Rosalind's eyes, the same gray, and I've missed his entire life because I was too proud." Edmund tugged at Caius's sleeve. "Papa, who is that lady?" Caius looked at Bryony. She nodded. That's your great-grandmother. She's been away for a long time, but I think she might want to stay. Edmund considered her gravely, then held out his stuffed rabbit. This is Sir Whiskers. He fights dragons. Octavia took the rabbit with trembling hands. Does he win? Always. Something broke in the old woman's face. Just grief, finally finding release. Later that evening, after Octavia had been settled in a guest suite, and Edmund had finally surrendered to sleep, Caius found Bryony in the library. She stood by the window where it had all begun, though she barely recognized the space anymore. Penny, for your thoughts. I was thinking about the night we met, how terrified I was, how certain that nothing good could come from such a desperate bargain. And now, she turned to face him. At 42, he had grown more distinguished, silver threading through his dark hair. The haunted shadows she had once seen had long since faded. Now, I understand that sometimes the most unlikely beginnings lead to the most extraordinary endings. He crossed to her, sliding his arms around her waist. Poetic. I learned from the best. You gave me access to excellent literature. His laugh was warm against her hair. Do you ever regret it? The way we started? Never. Every lie led to truth. Every calculation led to feeling. Every moment of that impossible arrangement led to this. She gestured at the library, at the evidence of their life together, at the faint sounds of their household settling into night. I'd do it all again, she said quietly. Every terrifying moment. Even the part where my grandmother tried to destroy us. Especially that part. It taught us what we were willing to fight for. He pulled her closer, his forehead resting against hers. I love you, he said. Still. Always. Against every expectation. I love you too. They stood together, as moonlight painted silver across the shelves. Two people who had found each other in the most improbable circumstances and built something neither had dared to dream. And somewhere in the stacks, surrounded by centuries of accumulated wisdom, the echoes of a whispered proposition faded into something far more enduring. Love. Real and permanent and true. The end. Thank you for staying with us through every twist and turn of this extraordinary journey. If this story made your heart race, brought tears to your eyes, or reminded you that love finds us in the most unexpected ways, please show your support by liking, commenting, subscribing, and sharing with fellow lovers of sweeping romance. Your support keeps our storytelling corner alive and thriving. Stay tuned. Another captivating tale awaits you at the end of this video. Click, listen, and let yourself be swept away once more. From the bottom of our hearts, thank you for being here.